Hello, thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today we are going to talk about how to pick goals. This was a requested video, a highly requested video about how to figure out what your goals are. And before we jump into the 5 suggestions, ideas, ways to figure out your goals that I'm going to tell you about, I want to start by reminding you that there is no right or wrong. There are no good goals and bad goals, right goals, wrong goals. And in fact, I did a whole video on big goals versus small goals because I truly believe that one of the biggest struggles is that we compare our goals to everybody else's. And we're like, well, my goals are too small. And that video, spoiler alert, I tell you, there is no such thing as small goals. The important thing is that your goals matter to you. I believe in what I am here trying to do is make sure that you are living a life that you enjoy living. And I believe that goals are how you get there, regardless of their caliber, how long they're gonna take, what they are, it doesn't matter. If they are going to lead you to a life that you want to live, that is all that matters. So if you haven't watched that video or you need a reminder of there is no such thing as big goals or small goals, check that video out. But in this video, I'm gonna give you 5 tangible things, ways to figure out what your goals are. So the first one is pretty obvious, and a lot of you have probably done this in the past or are continuing to do this, and that is prep work in some sort of goal planner. If you've been around, I've been reviewing goal planners on my channel for the last couple of months. There are a ton of options out there, and if you've decided to go with a pre-printed goal planner, typically that planner comes with some sort of prep work, some sort of reflection section, whether it's on categories of life or just questions to ask yourself. A lot of times those planners come with prep work, and that is going to help you figure out what your goals are. So if you are using a pre-structured planner, you probably don't need the rest of this video because your planner is going to help you figure out what your goals are. Now, if you are going on what the video I posted last week about creating your goals in a notebook, you might not have a lot of that prep work. So you need a different methodology, a different way to figure out what your goals are. That brings us to option number 2, which is the ideal day scenario. And we're gonna talk about this in 2 different camps. So if you've never heard of this, this is one of those fun kind of like get to know you questions, but I feel like we sometimes get lost in either the reality or the fantasy. You typically go one way or the other. So we're gonna do it both ways. So on one page, I want you to start with the reality. What is your ideal day given your current reality, right? There are likely things that you would change about your ideal day without drastically altering your current day, if that makes sense, right? Like, sure, we'd all like to win the lottery and like not work, and we'll talk about that when we get to Fantasyland, but when we're talking about reality, given your current setup, right? You've got to get the kids to school, you've got to get dinner on the table, you've got to go to work, you've got to clean the house, all the things that like have to get done as part of your current reality. But what would your ideal day look like given that current reality? What time would you get up? What would that morning look like to you? What would you have for breakfast? Would breakfast already be pre-made? What time would you leave the house? What would you listen to in the car on the way or on the subway or walking to work? How would work feel? What would you do for lunch? What time would you leave work? What would you do when you got home? What would be the first thing you do when you got home? What would you have for dinner? Would dinner be pre-made? Is somebody else helping you with dinner? What does your evening routine look like? How are you spending your evenings? What does the weekend look like? What's the balance between rest and chores and household things? What would your ideal, okay, that was almost like an ideal week when I creeped into the weekend. I want you to focus on the ideal day, an ideal weekday. What would that look like to you? Now, I'm not saying that you're gonna wake up tomorrow and start living that ideal day. That is not feasible. But you can look at that ideal day and think to yourself, okay, what would I need to change? What are some of the goals that I would want to change in order for this to feel that way, right? Maybe one of the things was you come home and dinner's already planned. Maybe starting to implement a weekly meal plan would be a good option for you, right? Being able to take the ideal day and pick out what goals you could set to get you closer to that ideal day. Then I want you to take off your reality hat and put on your fantasy hat and answer the question, if you could do whatever you want and time and money were no object, what would your fantasy ideal day look like? What time would you wake up? What would you have for breakfast? What's the first thing that you would do? And maybe you would go to work, maybe you love your job, and that is still part of your fantasy ideal day. But for a lot of us, I don't know if that's actually the case. As much as I love you and filming these videos for you, my fantasy day would probably include reading a book by the pool, going to take a dance class, going to see a Broadway show, eating a delicious steak with a glass of red wine, right? Like that's my ideal fantasy day. What would your ideal fantasy day look like? Now, the goals that we pick from this ideal day are not going to be an every day, every week kind of goal. But just because that is an ideal day and the likelihood that you get to do all those things in one day on a regular basis is likely a 0% chance, ask yourself, how can you start incorporating some more of those things into your everyday, right? That typically will relate to a lot of more like fun goals, but it could also relate to some other goals as well. If I just listed out the things I'd like to do on my ideal day, but I'm spending my money on things that aren't that, maybe I need to ask myself why. Like, why am I spending money on this instead of on Broadway show tickets, right? And maybe budgeting and some sort of budget goal, finance goal would be helpful for me. But starting to look at your ideal fantasy day and asking yourself, how can you incorporate that on a more regular basis? And what are the goals that you need to do now to help you get there? By the way, if you want to do kind of an in-between option, I'm not going to go on and on about this because I think you get the idea. There is like that middle world, right? Where it's like your ideal day, but still within the confines of reality. So like you're still getting up and going to work, but maybe you want to get Starbucks every day on the way to work. And so budgeting for that is kind of an option, or you want to have a job where you don't have to commute. That would be kind of it's fantasy because it couldn't start tomorrow, but it's still a little bit more realistic. It's not like spending the whole day by the pool. All right, category number 3, idea number 3, question really to ask yourself that I think is important when it comes to figuring out our goals is, what improvements would you want to make on your life? And I don't mean like, again, winning the lottery and quitting my job. I mean like the little things. Where are the little improvements that you would want to see? Would you like your house to be a little bit cleaner? Do you want your relationships to be a little bit stronger? Do you want a few more friendships? Do you want to read more books? Like, what are those little improvements that you would want to make that you regularly tell yourself like, well, I don't have time for that, or I can't do that? Those are always great options for setting goals because those are things that you actually can do. And I've said this before, we're gonna pop it up again. This is a mug that I've created that all goals are achievable on the right timeline. And I truly 100% believe that with the exception of like becoming a mermaid, you can achieve any goal that you set your mind to. It might take longer than you want it to, right? And that all goals are achievable on the right timeline. So asking yourself, where are the little improvements that I would want to make in my life? And how can I set a goal? What is a goal I could set to get me closer to that improvement? But sometimes we don't actually know what the exact end state we're working towards is. And that can sometimes hold us back from setting it as a goal, right? So let's say one of the small improvements you wanna make is to drink more water. I get this question a lot. It's like, well, what should my water goal be? How much water should I be drinking? And I'm not a health and fitness expert, but I have done a lot of research on this and talked to other health and fitness experts about it. And the truth is, there's no right answer. The amount of water that your body needs on a regular basis is based on so many factors that there is not one right answer. So what I always tell people is that if you have a goal to drink more water, you don't need to know the end state. You don't need to know like, I'm trying to work up to 100 ounces. Let's just start working on more, right? So right now I drink 1 cup of water per day. And when I say cups, I measure water in like vehicles, not necessarily ounces, because I just think it's simpler. But let's say you're drinking 1 of these per day. All right, next week your goal is 1.5. And that's it. Keep it simple. Don't worry about like, well, I'm trying to get to this end state. And so I think when it comes to improvements, not worrying about the end state can be very freeing, and thinking more about the little tiny improvement you make right now. And so when it comes to something like water, keep adding water until it feels right. It took me a while to get there, but eventually I figured out like, this is the right amount of water for my body, given everything right now, my diet, my exercise, where I live, etc. Now, during parts of the year, sometimes I need a little bit more because the climate has shifted. But for the most part, I know what I'm working towards. I didn't know that when I started that goal. So I feel like that was a little bit of a tangent. But the point is that improvements on your life don't necessarily have to be like, I'm trying to get to this end final state, crossing this finish line. It could be, I just want a little bit more of this, or I want this to be a little bit better. What is a small goal that you can set to help that be more or better? Question number 4, category number 4, thing to think about when it comes to figuring out your goals is, what are some long-term achievements that you would like to see? And I think when we hear this phrase, we immediately think about like work and like professional achievements. I don't even want that. I mean, that could be part of it if you want to incorporate some long-term achievements. Like for me, where did I see this recently? Like I decided I want to speak at a commencement, like a graduation. I love public speaking in general, but like how cool would that be to like go back to my university and speak? Now, I went to a big school, so The likelihood that I'm ever gonna be able to be on that stage is probably, that would be really tough, but that would be like a long-term awesome achievement for me, right? But it doesn't have to be professional. What are some personal long-term achievements that you would love to see? One of them could be, I wanna be a grandparent someday. One of them could be, I wanna travel to this place. One of them could be, I wanna travel to all 7 continents. I actually don't really have that. I don't really have any desire to go to Antarctica, but what are the long-term achievements in your life that you want to see happen? Now, the hard part is that you look at those and you're like, that's far away, right? I'm not even a parent yet. So being a grandparent seems very far away and almost unfeasible. But I could ask myself then, part 2 to this category is, what are the things I can do now to help me foresee that long-term achievement, right? What are the steps that I could take? What are the smaller goals I could take to help me get there? So becoming a grandparent, first off, I would need to become a parent. So like that's step 1. Second off would be living long enough to see my children have children. So taking care of my health. One of the planners I reviewed, if you watched the video that went up last week of 4 planners, has this section where it has you list out goals for 1 year, 3 years, 10 years, and lifetime. And I said in that review video, I wish they were flipped around. It was in that order, and I just wish it were the other way around, because in my mind, we're going to start with the lifetime. Like, what are the things I want to achieve in my lifetime? Okay, what does that mean for 10 years? What does 10 years look like? What does 3 years look like? And then what are the things for within the next year that I really could work on that would get me to those lifetime achievements? Again, it can be a little bit overwhelming and maybe even scary to think about those long-term things. And you're like, no, I wanna focus on the now, I wanna focus on the next year. But if you're struggling to figure out what you wanna focus on in the next year, thinking about where you want to be at some point in your life and working your way backwards is a great place to start. And then the last question that I'm gonna ask you, and this might seem way, way, way too simple, but what makes you happy? What makes you happy? And that might be hard. It might be hard to be like, this is what truly makes me happy, but I want you to think about when you have felt happiness. What are you doing? And the truth is that it's different for all of us. There are different things that make people happy, right? I told you I love public speaking. There are people that dread public speaking, right? So that would not make them happy. What are the things that genuinely make you feel joy? And ask yourself, how can I set a goal to do more of those? Like I said, I truly believe that the purpose of goals is to help you create a life that you enjoy living. So at the root of that is what makes you happy. So just because I have you answer the question, what makes you happy, doesn't necessarily mean that your goals, I'm just trying to get you to have goals that are fun and happy. Now I want you to have goals that are fun and happiness, but there might be some goals that are not as exciting that at the end of the day are going to lead you to happiness, right? Maybe what makes you happy is having free time at the end of the day, in the evenings, to either spend by yourself or spend with your spouse, spend with your kids. But in order for that to be the case, you need to make sure that you're committing to cleaning on the weekends so that you have those evenings, weekday free, whatever it is. I'm just making up examples to showing you how setting a goal that might not seem like a happy goal could lead you to having more time to do things that make you happy. So asking yourself, what makes you happy? And how can I set goals? What goals can I pull out to help me get there? So that is the last question. I know that that feels like it can be a little bit like, you're like, that's it? Like just that's all? And really when it comes down to it, I think we overcomplicate it. I think we think that goals need to be these big, massive, complicated hurdles that are miserable and difficult. And sometimes they are. Sometimes they are big hurdles that are miserable and difficult, but sometimes they're not, and they don't all have to be. And instead of overcomplicating it, picking something that's going to make an improvement on your life, that's going to help you reach that ideal day, help make you happier, that is what is important. And as always, this is not a tip that goes with picking goals, but a tip for this concept is to always keep a running list. Always keep a running list of goal ideas. Anytime you come up with an idea, I want you to keep it on a list. I've talked about this before, but I always have multiple running lists for different durations, right? So I have got a list for like the immediate next thing, whether that's the next month or the next quarter or both. Then I've got the next year, and I will start that pretty early on in the year, like January or February, because by January or February, I've set my goals for the year. And if I come up with an idea of something that doesn't fit into the goals that I've set, and I don't have a good reason of like why to shake it up, it goes on next year's idea list, and I will start that pretty early. So as I go into the next year, I've already got a decent idea list running, and then I have like a lifetime goal list. Like I'm pretty sure that that thing is not gonna fit into next year's plan for whatever reason that is. So I'm gonna put it on the future list plan. I actually, as I'm saying that, I have something on my future list that in my head wasn't potential for 23, but it might be. I might move it back, or I might do what I talked about in the lifetime section, and I might say, what is the smaller step I can take this year to help get me to that big long-term dream? But having those running lists always, and wherever you store those, the notes app in your phone, mine is just on my iPad, like on GoodNotes, but storing those somewhere is really helpful. And the most important thing when it comes to picking your goals is that you let go of any shoulds, and you let go of anybody else's opinions on what your goals need to be, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is that they're important to you. And if you need to go back and watch, I did a video a long time ago on picking goals that are important to you. So that one, like this one is like actions to actually pick goals. That video is like, I have the list of goals and now I'm trying to narrow it down and pick goals that are important to me. You might need to rewatch that before the new year to remind yourself that you are in control of your life and your goals, and picking goals that are important to you is the most important thing. So that is gonna be it for this video. I feel like I just like spewed a lot of information, but hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, you wouldn't mind giving it a thumbs up. I would greatly appreciate that. And if you're new here, please click that subscribe button. I upload new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday focused on helping you achieve your goals. Thank you so much for watching. But what would your ideal